Hey guys, John here. So today's topic is losing motivation. Now, this is something that will happen. It's not if, it is when. So on this channel, we have tutorials, we have patch videos, we have courses, we have a lot of stuff. But I think a lot of the things that we are lacking is some of the psychological aspects of either sound design, production, things like that. Now, I wrote down a couple things that might help you if you face any of these issues. So the first one is called taking a break. Now, that might sound very obvious. It might sound, oh, of course, take a break. That's what you do. But sometimes I think we don't do that, or we might not realize how long we should take the breaks. So it's kind of a standard thing. There's a good system where if you're working for an hour or maybe 45 minutes, maybe around then, take a break, maybe take 5-10 minutes, go outside, get some sun, and then come back. And you're going to realize how much more refreshed you are. Now, that's kind of the smaller breaks, right? That's kind of the breaks in between the session. But what happens if you're going really long on a song, an album, a whole sound pack? Who knows what you're doing, but you're starting to feel burned out. You're like, this isn't really fun anymore. I don't really enjoy this. A saw wave is just boring. It's not as inspiring as it used to be. So for that, also taking a break is a great idea. But not just taking a break for 5-10 minutes. Sometimes you might need to take a break for a week, sometimes 2 weeks, sometimes a month to really reset your mind and kind of live life and gather the inspiration that life gives us, so then you can come back to it and be refreshed again. So you can say, oh, I remember this synthesizer. I remember this patch that I made. I remember the song that I was working on. And you're going to look at it almost from a different perspective. So that's really, really important things, because there's times, and also, happens to me too, where I open up my DAW and I'm like, I really don't feel like doing anything today. I open up a synth, I'm like, no, I'm not feeling it. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. That's just our brains telling us we need to step away from this just for a little bit, gather our bearings, get our bearings straight, and then come back to this with a fresh mind and see things a little bit differently. And you're going to be surprised how much better it's going to be. But keep in mind, if the break is quite a long time, you're going to have to kind of play a little bit of catch up. And that's like with anything, right? That's whether if you're taking a break on guitar or any other hobby that you have, you're going to kind of have to re-familiarize yourself. Say, okay, what were my macros? What were my hotkeys again? And once you kind of regain that knowledge, from then you're going to be much faster than if you're just going to try to hammer through it. I got to make this patch. I got to make this song. Because at the end of the day, if you kind of just try to fight through it and it's not working, at the end of the day, your patch, your song, your product, whatever it's going to be, is going to suffer in the end. And once you put something out there, it's out there forever, right? If you make a song and you upload it, it's out there, right? You can make corrections, sure, but the first initial draft, the first impression that people hear is going to be out there. So it's much better to take a break, maybe however long that might be, and get the song or the patch or whatever it is right. So then the first person, or the person who gets that first perspective, can actually see that as, I guess, how it's supposed to be. So that's kind of one of the first things, because remember, we only get one first impression, and that's it. So that's the first one, is taking a break. It's very important, which is probably why it's the first one. So another one is changing your workflow. So we all probably have templates that we open up, and I have one if I'm doing a synthwave song, or if I'm just doing sound design. I have certain templates set up so I can start a little bit faster to get done whatever it is I'm doing. So, and that's a cool thing. It's very helpful, saves a lot of time. But sometimes you might need to change up that workflow, because if you're like, everything I'm doing sounds the same, I'm doing the same thing every single time, what's going on? It's probably because you're starting and doing everything the exact same way. You have your template set up, you have probably your EQ set up, who knows how you have it set up. You got your main synths there, and that's cool. But if you don't change things up just a little bit, you're going to get the same result, right? If you keep doing the same things, you're going to be getting the exact same thing. So change up that workflow just a little bit, and you'll be surprised that, oh, okay, this is kind of cool. And that's kind of what I mentioned in a couple of videos ago about not making the same patch, because we start out with a sound wave, we'll put some unison on it, send it through a filter, raise up the resonance, give it some modulation on the cutoff, and we're like, okay, this is cool, but where does this go from here? Well, I keep making the same thing. Now this is just iterations of the same patch, and you can't really break out of that. So in that case, maybe start off with a weird, obscure waveform, and then kind of go from there and see where that takes you. And that also goes for your DAW or for your workflow in general. If you're like, okay, I always use this reverb and this delay, maybe try to use a weird thing that you're not really used to, because the different workflow is going to force you to make different decisions that you probably wouldn't have done otherwise. So that's a really important one too. Change up that workflow. And the third one, you can still take breaks, but you can also learn in a different way. So, for example, something that I would actually really like doing was, there's a practical side, and then there's also the theoretical kind of study side, right? So let's say you're learning some kind of thing, and you maybe read something about it, or you learn how something works, and then you go and apply that knowledge. So a lot of the times we're applying the knowledge, applying the knowledge that we have, right? We have a patch open, we have a session open, and we're actually doing something with it. So what we can do if we're taking a break from that, maybe what we can do is open up our synth. If we're looking to get better sound design, we can maybe find some preset packs that we like or some patches inside the synthesizers. Maybe they come stock. Maybe there's some people that you have patches from or something like that that you like the sounds of. And just kind of browse through and, maybe play a note and kind of look how everything works and kind of study, okay, what's the way they routed their effects? Okay, why does this sound the way it does? What modulations are on here? And maybe you can start writing some of these things down so you can remember them. So once you come back from that break, however long it might be, then you can say, oh, okay, this is what this person did. Let me go and try that and see what kind of results I might get. Because one of the best ways to learn something, if you're not actually doing it physically, or hands-on, I should say, is study what others have done, right? Because they've also spent a lot of time doing something, and you're like, oh, okay, this is really, really cool. A lot of the patches in the Yuhi stock libraries for a lot of their synths are very cool to learn from, because it kind of gets you out of the exact same workflow of we do this and then this and then this and this and our patch is done. There's things in there, there's modulation sources or stuff that they've landed with those modulations on things that we never really would think of doing. And we're like, okay, this is really interesting. And then you try that concept on a patch later on, and it might evolve into something completely different because that patch is based off this weird workflow thing that you learned from these sound designers. So that's a very important way to kind of get the to apply this later on. So you're kind of building a wealth of knowledge and then you go apply it later. Something that I would do as well is, I know that not everybody's a bookworm out there, but I am. So what I would do is I would go to sleep with a book or a manual about maybe sound design or just DSP or something like that, something to kind of forward my knowledge in the subject. And sometimes some of the stuff directly applied, some of it didn't really, right? So, there's things I'll be reading up about bit depth and things like that. And while that doesn't necessarily apply to making this patch sound really awesome, it's kind of cool to just learn the stuff behind it because maybe some point in the future, that knowledge might be useful to apply somewhere. So that kind of helps as well. And kind of just learning what sound is, all that kind of things like that. So that's kind of a cool way to learn the theoretical side, the bookworm side. And then once it comes down to the practical stuff, then you can kind of apply that almost on a subconscious level sometimes. So something to think about. And I know this video said 3, but there's one extra one, and I wanted to kind of throw this one in there because it's very important. And this is health, not only physical, but also mental, right? If you're not feeling good, either physically or mentally, you can't really expect yourself to really make something that you could be proud of. And yes, there's exceptions and things like that, but let's say you come home really, really late from work, you're very tired, and you maybe haven't eaten as much as you should, or maybe you overate and you feel really bad. You really probably should have ate that hamburger at lunch. And you're just not feeling up to it. Maybe your brain's foggy. You just can't really concentrate on things. And you open up your DAW and then you start working on something and there's no motivation. You just can't let go of the concept of how awful you feel. That's not a good environment to work in. So close your laptop, maybe get some rest, maybe do some exercise, go outside and kind of get back to that feeling of feeling better, right? Because at the end of the day, the product will suffer if you're suffering. So you need to really just work on yourself first, work on the health, every aspect of it as you can, and then come back to it with a clear mind, a clear body, and then focus on what you want to do. And I think that one maybe should have been first because it's very important, because there's that saying, if you don't have your health, you don't have anything else at all. So maybe that should have been first, but I guess it's an extra one. So that's something to think about. Go to bed on time, drink plenty of water if you're dehydrated, if you're not getting enough sleep. All these kind of things will contribute to doing a poor job of whatever it is that you're doing. And that's not just in sound design, that's just really in anything as well. If you're learning how to play bass or guitar, or maybe something that has nothing to do with music at all, that also applies quite a lot. So something to think about, maybe go to bed at an early time. There's a really interesting book out there. It's called Why We Sleep, and I think it's a very good one that probably everybody should read, and kind of goes in the concept of why are we always feeling tired? Why I slept a good amount, but I still feel tired the next day. I need to drink another coffee or another energy drink, but I'm still tired. I don't get what's going on. So this book explains a lot of the questions. And if that's something you're interested in learning about, I can link that below, because not everything has to do with sound design. Sometimes we have to kind of step back a little bit, look at the philosophy, look at maybe the psychology of things that does kind of indirectly affect what we do as sound designers, producers, and so on and so forth. So yeah, hopefully you enjoyed this video. Maybe kind of made you think a little bit different about things. And yeah, thank you so much for watching. Hopefully you learned something. Read that book. It's a really good one. And yeah, I think that's all for today. So yeah, we'll see you in the next video.